Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Before we get too far into the video, if you might hit that like button, that really helps to get my channel promoted, and I appreciate it. I also love it if you leave a comment. I like to hear how you do things. I like to hear ideas for videos. Um, Constructive criticism is always nice, so tell me what you think. I have a couple of green stones that I've been sitting on for a while that I kind of wanted to do something with, and they match pretty well. So I'm going to do those as a pendant with a long skinny tourmaline crystal, a black tourmaline crystal, which is sometimes called schorl, and we'll do that as a pendant. I think it's going to turn out to be kind of a pretty piece, so we'll see. We'll see though, because all the stones are pretty. Because the tourmaline is the way it is, I'm going to have to use a little bit of epoxy to hold it in place, so I'll probably do that after I get everything polished and set in front of you, and then I'll add that in afterwards, but I'll slide it in there for show. Before we get too far in though, I wanted to thank some people. I have a big nice group over on Patreon, and I wanted to thank them for their support. They've created this really wonderful environment over there, and I really appreciate the community that they've put together. There's a lot of skilled people and a lot of really creative people over there, and a lot of beginners too, who are all kind of learning things from them and from me, and I'm learning from them. It's a great place, so thank you for that. I really appreciate that. The other group is my YouTube subscribers. We just passed 13,600, I think it was, and I really appreciate that. That's amazing. Thank you for all of the kind comments. I get so many nice comments from people on YouTube, and I really appreciate that. I also appreciate the financial contributions, like the Buy Me a Coffee and the Super Thanks. That really helps a lot. So thanks for that. With those things being said, let's get started on this project. So this is one of my design idea books that are available in my merch store if you're interested. This particular one has some conversion charts on the back, and a couple of the other ones have some interesting information as well. One is American wire gauge to millimeters, which I think people in Europe or overseas might find handy. This one is fractions of an inch to decimals to millimeters, and I find this one useful because I'm still trying to learn how to think in millimeters and centimeters. It's taking me a while, but I'm starting to get a feel for it. So they also are where I sketch out my projects. So I find that to have helped me to produce a better outcome. I have a little bit of a plan in mind here, previous ones. Alright, here's today's. So I have this stone, and I think I used to know what the name was, but I don't remember now. Somebody gave it to me. It's kind of a cool, pretty green stone, and I thought it would make a great pendant. And I also have this tourmaline. I have this tourmaline, which is a kind of a similar green color, and it's a little trillion cabochon. I think it's about 8 millimeters. But I thought I'm going to mount that open backed up here, attached to a little tube bail. And I've already actually made this part of it in advance because of time. I'm starting pretty late tonight, and it'll also be a long video if I have to make 3 different settings. So I'm going to make a standard bezel setting for this using 3/16 inch fine silver bezel, which is 4.76 millimeters tall, I believe. And I may file it down a little bit depending upon what I need. It's also 26 gauge, which is the thickness, and it's 0.41 millimeters thick, which is the thicker stuff that I generally use. I'm going to continue this little line here down. This is actually going to be a black tourmaline crystal. Got a little black tourmaline crystal here. I thought it would be kind of fun to, since we got a nice straight side on this cab here, it'd kind of be fun to mirror that straightness a little bit. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to make 2 little loops out of, I don't know, 22 gauge silver or something like that, sheet silver, and then make little loops and attach them with silver balls. And then I have a piece of 10 gauge square wire that I'm going to kind of bend and file to a kind of more of a point to continue that line down. And I think that'll be kind of a cool looking piece. And then we'll attach it all together with some loops. Here's the, where did that go? Here's the piece I made up here for this already. So we'll just have to put a loop on the top of this one, and then we can assemble it all But let's start by making a bezel for this, and then we'll make some loops for this and see if we can attach them on with some little silver balls that we make out of some scrap. And then we'll file this and bend this and get it to kind of match what I was looking for here. And then I'll make some more silver balls out of some scrap to match that. So I think that'll be kind of a cool one. We'll see. It's also, because it's going to be on 2 loops here, this will swing sideways pretty easily. But the tube bail, and the advantage of a tube bail is that it kind of keeps it straightforward on a chain. It doesn't have a tendency to twist too much. And that'll kind of keep this from flipping around too much, I think. But, alright, so let's make this bezel first, and then we'll make some loops. We got a sharp point on this. I think this stone may be a little on the soft side based on the finish on it, because it doesn't have a high glassy polish like some things do. So I'm going to be a little careful when I'm setting this later on. And I'm going to try not to force it down into a setting or anything so I don't break it. It sort of looks a little bit like marble of some sort, but I really don't know. So I even asked my friend John, and he said he wasn't sure. I used to have a pretty good grip on a lot of the you know, semi-precious or just novelty gemstones like different jaspers and things. You know, I knew pretty much most of the commonly used ones, but there's so many on the market anymore, and there's always new ones showing up. It's hard to keep track of them all. Some of them, in my opinion, are sort of unsuitable for gemstones because they're too soft. Seraphinite is one that comes up periodically that people talk about. And it's so soft you can scratch it with your fingernail. And so it's not really a super good stone to use in a piece of jewelry because people are really hard on their jewelry. Okay, let's file the ends and then we'll solder this together. If you've never been to my channel before, I use primarily hard silver sheet solder. The occasional foray into something else, but not very often. I use a liquid flux that I dribble on with a little dripper bottle, and sometimes I spray it on with a spray bottle. My torch is a Silversmith model, which is their acetylene air torch, and it's just a lovely torch. And I use a #1 tip for most things. These are most of the common questions I get asked. I've already got a little bit of solder here, so I'm just going to flux this and pick up one of those pieces and put it right over that solder joint. But first, a little flux on there. If you're new to this, bezels solder pretty fast, so you have to be kind of really focused when you're doing it. And little ones provide different challenges than big ones, kind of. Sometimes on big ones, because they're a little flimsy and floppy when they're this size, if you push them into a little dimple on the bottom like that, it makes the overall piece a little springier, and then it's easier to keep those ends pushing tight together before you solder them. So that's kind of a little trick you can use sometimes. I'm going to keep this sharp corner right there and just kind of flatten it out everywhere else so it kind of fits. I think it's always good to consider the hardness of the stones you're using when you're deciding what kind of a piece of jewelry you're going to make it into. Like, pendants don't get beat up as much as say rings, because they're not, you know, they're up here. You rarely, you know, chest bump people, I would imagine, unless unless that's something you do. So you're unlikely to bang it into things as much as like on your hands with a ring. You know, people talk with their hands and they're throwing them around and, you know, gesturing and stuff, and sometimes you bang them into stuff. So, you know, if you have a really nice opal or something in a ring, you got to be kind of careful. Or just, you know, put opals in rings sometimes, or just use doublets or something so that it's a little protected. Same way with things like amber and stuff. You know, you can scratch them up really easily. Okay, so we have that, and we need to create some little rings that go around that. I think I'm going to use 22 gauge. Supposing I can find my 22 gauge. So I don't want the strips to be too, you know, like stand out too much. So let's cut them relatively narrow. Let's flatten this first. I got a pretty straight spot right here, so probably just use some of these calipers here. That's a pretty good width. Should we just go with that? That looks okay to me. File this a little bit on the side that I just cut. Oops. I'm having grip problems today. So rather than just trying to wrap this around, this is not perfectly round because it's a natural crystal, so it's got kind of almost a shield shape from the end. So we're going to have to kind of I'm going to look at my nail making pliers. This one's pretty close, so if I wrap it around that one, it's going to spring back and be a little bit too big. So I'm going to use the smaller one to start shaping a circle. Should allow me to kind of get a rough idea about how wide it needs to be. And we can adjust it accordingly. Okay, that can give me kind of an idea, so I can make a mark. Right there. I think that's where I'll cut it. Again, I have some solder here. I'm going to do what's called pick soldering. If you're interested in learning about pick soldering, I have a good video about it up there. It's one of those really useful skills that is worth looking into if you haven't tried it yet. It's where you take your soldering pick and you pick up a little bit of solder, and it allows you to place it really precisely. So once you kind of get the hang of it, it's super good about speeding up your process. So pick up a little bit of solder on your pick, heat this up to the soldering temperature, and just put this right in there. It just jumps on there. It's honestly a little loose. I think I'm going to cut a little piece out and then resolder it. So I'm just going to use my saw and cut a little piece right where the solder joint is. and then we'll come back and resolder it. So after I cut it and resoldered it, it was just a little bit too snug to get it in there. So what I did was, if you look at this, like I said, it's kind of like almost trillion shaped when you look at it end on, and so actually I shaped it into that shape. I was able to get it to slide on there like that. So that's one. We just need to duplicate that to make a second one. And so let's do that. Mark it right about there. That'll get us pretty close. We can always use a diamond burr if we need to ream it out on the inside a little bit if it's close. I would have used a little bit easier to shape thinner sheet, but on something like this where it's standing by itself, it has a tendency when you polish it to get really thin. That's pretty good. Okay. That's going to go up there kind of like that with some balls between it, but we need to put a bottom on this bezel. I was kind of getting ahead of myself there. This is 26 gauge, that should be good enough for this. Okay, let's solder that down. Whenever you're making a big bezel like this, it's a little challenging to get the piece of sheet on the bottom up to temperature without overheating the bezel on top, especially if you're new to this. So don't be too upset if you melt a few bezels before you get the hang of it. The sheet on the bottom is not as exposed to the flame. It's kind of insulated by the sheet, by the pad underneath it. You can get around that by elevating it. Some people use various means to do that. You can tip the thing up while you're and heat from below. And make those wire kind of tripod things you can get underneath with the heat. Those are effective. You can create a little a bridge out of something like some little mini crucibles or something like my friend Flying Chef does, which is a good idea. Okay, so let's get that all kind of crusty. Let's throw one or two more in there just for good measure. So as I reheat this flux, it goes through kind of a sticky stage. And if these aren't quite touching the edge, you can kind of push them up there and they'll kind of glue down that way. Not really glue down, but kind of stick in place because of the gooiness of the flux. Now again, getting the sheet on the bottom is the challenge. The bezel being on top is exposed to the flame and gets hot readily. So I'm kind of avoiding the bezel and hitting all the surface area of the sheet. You do it like this, or like I said, you could tip it up if you want to. Just want to make sure it's touching all the way around in case your sheet warped a little bit. I'm just tapping it lightly while it's liquid. Make sure we get a seam all the way around. I don't want any embarrassing gaps. What would people say? Be like, don't watch that Chad guy. He's got embarrassing gaps on his bezels. I think everything went just fine. I always check before I start trimming off the edge just to make sure I didn't miss any spots. Just take this right down. I just went and smoothed out the bezel a little bit after filing it with an abrasive white wheel on the Dremel. So we need to make some balls now, and I need to figure out about how far from the ends I want these things to be. Should I have them right at the ends? Could. That would kind of keep the ends from chipping or anything. I kind of like that. Let's do that. I'm going to put a T there and a B here. So I can remember which one's which. And then let's make some little balls. I need to find my truffle block. Some scrap wire. Actually have some laying around here. Don't need very big ones, I don't think. Just enough to separate it from the bezel a little bit. So I'm going to make some marks on the bezel here so I know where to attach these two. It might be easiest to attach the balls to the side first and then butt that up against there. Switching over to my solderite pad. Soldering something small to something big here. Most of the heat goes on the big piece because it takes longer to get that hot. I'm actually using a pretty big piece of solder so I don't have to add any more when I solder it to the other thing. With balls it just kind of covers the whole surface. So. Alright. So let's see if I can get the bottom and the top lined up right. I'm going to cool that off and take a peek at it. I'm going to use the Dremel and kind of like clean that up a little bit so it slides right in there, and then we'll start adding other stuff. Okay, I have to be a little careful when I'm doing this, but I've been doing some little fine tuning to get these to line up nice. And I've got it now to where I think I can push it in there. And I will, like I said, I'll put a little epoxy in there when we're almost done. But for the time being, what I need to do is I wanted to have a piece of square wire, which is this thing here. I need to file the end flat and then curve it, and then we'll start filing it into kind of a taper. So I think maybe we'll use this to get it started. If you need to, you could hook this in like a vise or something, or you can use 2 pairs of pliers. I'll try using these nylon ones so we don't ding it up too badly, just to give us a little more leverage. That's not too shabby. If I cut it off about right here. Let's see if I can taper that down a little bit. It's going to take a little filing, so I may not make you watch me do the whole thing, but we're just going to... Sometimes when I have something small to hold like this, and I need to file it to a taper, clamp it in my miter vise jig, even though I'm clamping it sort of non-traditionally. That just gives me more to hold on to when I'm doing this motion. So I'm feeling like that's pretty good. I might need to do some fine tuning there, but so I think I need, because of the distance from this one to the actual frame that holds this, if I want this to kind of be a continuation of that line, I'm going to have to put a little bit bigger ball here and a smaller one here. The stone also is kind of like, it's not like a teardrop shape. It's actually comes to a point here and then it comes down in a different angle there. So I'm doing a nice curve on something that isn't quite as nicely curved. Does that make sense? I also think this needs to be bent slightly more. So I think on this one I'm going to solder them to this thing first and then butt it up in there so that I can feel like it's in the right spot. So I'm going to pull this out of here carefully. Okay, there should be enough solder on there, but I have extra if I need to pick some on there. I guess we'll find out. Pretty good. Be right back. So now I need to attach this to this, and I have a jump ring on here made out of 16 gauge round wire, which I think is 1.3 maybe millimeters. Yeah. And I left it open, and this one's a slightly bigger one, and I'm going to solder it closed and then attach it right about there. I'm going to go ahead and solder that, and then we'll get it pickled for a while. And then we can finish it up. I'm going to do it like kind of like that, so that the solder joint is not touching the ring, and then I should be able to just pick a little bit on there if I'm careful. Could use like an easy solder or something there if you wanted to. Make sure I got a solid connection. Looks like I did. So far so good. And we just need to let it pickle for a while. So I went ahead and I set the tourmaline up top here, and this is all ready to set. I've put a little of this uncorrugated cardboard behind it to raise it to just the right level. Didn't take but one layer really. And I'm going to set the stone. I do this a little differently than some people, and I use my chain nose pliers, the surfaces on it. I'm going to use this shined up piece here to do the bezel pushing, where I push it right up against there. And I'm pushing down with my other thumb while I'm doing this. Sharp corners are always a challenge with bezels because you have to kind of compress too much metal into a small space that it doesn't want to be compressed into. So sometimes you can file the bezel a little bit thinner in those spots in order to kind of compress it in there more easily. You feel like you have it pushed up against there tight. Now I'm going to use the rounded outer part, rounded upper part here to burnish that top edge, which is where you lay some pressure on it with that and rub it. probably, since I have to get some pictures taken here, I'm gonna take it before I glue these in. Just gonna push that in there like that. And then we'll get some pictures of it. And then tomorrow, when I'm not quite as tired, I'll glue that in there. So I think that came out all right. I like it. It looks complicated, but it wasn't super complicated. So, all right, well, I'll get some better pictures of that and put it at the end. All right, well, that was a 3-stone swinging pendant. I hope you enjoyed that one. If anybody knows what that stone is, let me know. I've been curious about that. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit the like button before you leave. And I'd love it if you'd take a moment and check out my channel page. I have 367 videos or something thereabouts, so there's almost certainly something else you'll find interesting. If you hit the playlist page, it makes it easier to navigate because they're kind of split up into different categories. So check those out, and then come back and subscribe to my channel. I'd love to have you as a subscriber. The other thing is, check out the video description down below. There's some important links there. There's a link about safety, which is always important. And there's a link if you wanted to check out that ebook. You can purchase it there. Those design idea books that I showed you at the beginning, those are available on my merch store, and there's a link for that. And there's a link to my Patreon as well, so if you want to find out more about that community and see what they're about. So, thanks again. I appreciate you taking the time to watch my videos. Take care. Happy silversmithing.